changes in the price level. For example, there's a case study. The price of oil soared from $21 a barrel in 2002 before the Iraq War to $29 on March 19, 2003. That means soon after the invasion of Iraq, to $48 in January 2005 and to $145 in July 2008, a 400% increase. That does show that oil market is vulnerable to war. And this is one case. You can put another case of, say, the case of the Ukrainian war, then the war in the Middle East, which is also going on right now. So these are the case examples. Yes, the recent attack from Iran, yes, can also be seen. Yes, yes, that is also true because Iran also shares a large portion of its energy to those countries that Sharia just mentioned, for example, Australia and European countries. So the cyclical price incentives. So what is it? Net importers must diversify their energy sources and rely more on renewable energy and conservations. For exporters, internal economic diversification will lessen their dependence on export profits. So that means what we are looking at, not only at the point of importers, that means the countries who consume oil, but also those exporters whose economy is largely dependent on this. So one case example of this diversification from exporters' point of view can be Saudi Arabia. If you look at Saudi Arabia in recent times, you could see that there is a shift in focus from their economic concentration, that from a country which has been traditionally dependent on oil export is now focusing on other parts of the economy where the economy can be more sustainable, for example, tourism. And that's why there was that trillion dollar project of the line, the city, I mean, the most ultra modern city that the Saudi Arabia is making. And also, you could also see how Saudi Arabia is opening up in recent years for the tourists, not only from the Muslim countries, but also from the non-Muslim countries. And many things that have been historically prohibited or not legal is now started to get some sort of a permission or normative approval from the Saudi government. The demand and supply factors behind oil price is volatile because of so many calculations, not only because of war, but also uh, natural disaster, human-made disaster, and so on. So this is the oil production and consumption in 2007. If you look at that, which part of the world actually holds most of the oil and which part of the world actually consumes most of the oil. So if you look at Japan, so it has very less, if not any production, but its consumption is very high. So does for the United States. Despite having a lot of energy reserves, especially in Alaska and elsewhere in the continent of North America, United States is still one of the top consumers of oil in global market. And who are the world's biggest oil producers? So oil production by country in 2021, if you look at, it's the United States, then Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, Iraq, China, United Arab Emirates, and Iran. So these are the top producers of the top uh, sellers of global energy in the global energy market. Uh, uh, does anyone know about the war in 1973, which obviously called the Yom Kippur War? Anyone? It's another Arab-Israel war. Anyone? The war, Yom Kippur War in 1973. Anyone? Okay. So it was one of the wars, series of wars that took place between the Israelis and its Arab enemies or Arab competitors. And what happened after that war, that Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries actually reduced their and it created an energy crisis in the global energy market. We all know that what happens when the supplier stops or reduces the level of its supply to the market, it always spike up the price of the commodity. So it was the first indication that when the world is becoming more and more dependent on fossil fuels, how powerful can those countries be who hold the key to global energy market? And the recent examples can also be cited in those cases as well. So the key sources of instability in the global oil market. So if anyone asks you that what would be the factors that could actually make the oil market volatile. So the first one is Middle East. That means the conflict in the Middle East. So Middle East since the beginning of the last century or even prior to that has been the center of clash, and war and conflict, civil war, state war, you just name it, all types of majority of the war and conflict actually concentrated in the Middle East. And unfortunately, a large chunk of global oil reservoirs actually located in different Middle Eastern countries. The second one, which is also related to the Middle East, is conflict with Iran. With the risk of US and or a connection between Israel and US conflict with Iran over its nuclear program. And we can see the ramification of this in recent weeks, that how a coalition of US and Israel actually take a toll on Iranian national security, and how could it also risk Iran, because Iran holds one of the key to the global shipping channel, which is the Strait of Hormuz. So, say 40 to 50%, actually more than 40% of the global oil energy transports actually move across the Strait of Hormuz, and all the outbound ships must trespass through the Iranian water. So in that case, Iran holds the key to global energy, and that's why any sort of conflict with Iran could risk the supply of global energy. And the recent events where the Israelis try to sabotage Iranian nuclear facilities could, could actually endanger global energy supply. The third one is Iraq, Iran. Again, the two top suppliers of oil in global market. Iranian support for militia in Iraq. Historically, there has been conflict in Iraqi society between the Iraqis and the Kurdish. And also, it's a conspiracy theory. Many believe that the Iranians are partially responsible for this. Yes, Sharia, you could share your thoughts on mic so that everyone can hear rather than sharing them on the chat box. Okay, you just raise your hand and you can speak up. Then the fourth one is conflict in the Niger Delta, which is located in Africa. So not only the Middle East, but the whole MENA region. I did explain to you what is MENA. It's Middle East and North African region. And penultimately, it's the populist state. Populist state controls in Iran and Venezuela. Can anyone please tell me what is your understanding of a populist state? Before that, let me ask you, what's populism? Just share your raw. What is populism? Would anyone like to share their thoughts on populism? Anyone?
It's populism is basically when there's a leader or like a body is in power who is very popular among the people, but not necessarily through democracy, but still popular and has control over the people and control over the state. For instance, Putin is a populist leader
So, so why we call it populist, or he is a popular leader?
because he has popularity among the people.
So the people here is should be under the focus. Does it include most of the majority, the way we understand in democratic terms, isn't it? Or the way it's just a group of people, right? And also you could see that the rise of Modi would be another example of a political leader, isn't it? So when this sort of leader stays longer in power, it turns the state or its political culture into a populist state. And finally, the routes. That means the transportation. So in the first video, you saw how the Nord Stream and also the stream that goes through the southern route, they are all vulnerable to attacks. And we have also seen during the war in Iraq that how the terrorists and all the militia groups, they target these areas which actually can hurt any economy at any given time. So, what is the sharp politics? So, the earlier slides were about the shallow uh, oil markets. Now we will look at the sharp politics. So, political risk is exacerbated by choke points in transit routes. So, what are the choke points? Do you understand choke points? Anyone? Choke points? Anyone? What is a choke point?
Sir,
Yes.
they're basically geographical locations which are very narrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the Strait of Hormuz that you mentioned, it is a very narrow strait and it can easily be, uh, there can easily be a blockade made by Iran so that, the ships cannot pass through.
Yes. And also sometimes they are also called as the hotspots. Okay, because of the frequency of their usage and also the significance, yeah, of those particular straits. By the way, do you know what is a strait? In Bangla, we call them pronali, isn't it? So, what is a strait? Anyone? Anyone
That connects two oceans.
that connects two oceans? Does it necessary to be that it's always has to be two oceans?
Basically, two large water bodies, some sort
Yes,
of.
yes, yes. That is what that if any water body, narrow passage generally, it's two water bodies, then it's called a strait. So in that case, what is the difference between a strait and a canal? For example, we know about the Suez Canal, right? Why we are not calling it the Suez Strait of
It's
Suez?
man-made.
Yes, one is man-made, the other one is
Man-made.
natural, but they serves the same purpose, right? They serve the same purpose that they connect two larger water bodies. So in that case, if you look at the choke points and their importance, that nearly 40% of global oil shipment, including oil, transit through the Strait of Hormuz, 28% through Malacca, and 7% through Bab el Mandeb. So if time allows, if we have enough time before the semester final, I'll try to give one small lecture on the importance of Indian Ocean politics, and then we will have chance to know about these trades much in detail. But that's beyond our actually the boundary of the subject that we are studying, because we are not studying geopolitics, rather we are studying political geography. So our focus should be on other spatial aspects rather than the traditional geopolitics. So the case, one case where these choke points were exploited by the state. So Tehran threats in 2007 to close the Strait of Hormuz, it attacked over its nuclear program, show how oil transportation, civilian nuclear energy use, and nuclear proliferation can blend into an international security and conflict. And as rightly Sharia said that in the recent years, in the recent weeks, the tension between Iran, Israel, and USA and its allies could also threaten or could also again trigger these choke points. Supply side fragility is accompanied, that means from the supplier's point of view, is accompanied by limited elasticity of oil demand in the short run due to the transportation sector's high reliance on gasoline and other petroleum based motor fuels. That means we don't have much of an alternative if the pipelines are being attacked or being disrupted. We don't have much of an alternative. That means we are lacking our alternative plans. And finally, the change in this arena, such as switching to an alternative fuels, require long-term investment in technology and in infrastructure. So as you know that it's not that you discovered an oil source. It takes years for the engineers and also the infrastructures to be in place to finally get the benefit or to extract oil from the reservoirs. In the medium term, there are options such as increased use of hybrid cars. That means the cars or the vehicles, those use not only renewable energy but also non-renewable energy. So we already see the implication of this sort of vehicles or the use of these vehicles in our country, which could actually, what I could say, control the damage for a limited time, but it's not a long-term solution. So the long-term solution is that we need to get rid of this fossil fuel or non-renewable energy sources and move our focus to more renewable energy sources such as sunlight, wind, and uh, nuclear energy. Did you see that news yesterday that Bangladesh recorded the highest amount of electricity production yesterday? Have you seen this? Have you seen this?
Yes.
Yes, and the good news for it that for it, the next phase is the plant will be conducted online. Have you got the news?
Yes.
Okay, what about the next week? Because next week we have one class test.
We don't know that yet.
But try to know, try to know, because if it, we need to reschedule it, we need to reschedule it earlier. Hopefully the weather improves. So far, any query? Any query from anyone? Okay. So now we will look at three countries from three different geographical locations. One is from the Middle East, the other one is from South America, and one is from, say, Asia and Europe or Eurasia. So Iraq, Venezuela, and Russia. So you may say that why these three particular states? Why not Saudi Arabia? Yes, Saudi Arabia could have brought into the calculation, but uh, uh, Iraqi case, Iranian case or the Iraqi case would be much more interesting than the Saudi one. Have exploited, I mean, these three countries have exploited their energy sources and muscle to expand their regional influence with more vulnerable neighbors and complicated US interests. So if you look at all these three countries, by the way, the first one should be Iran, not Iraq, that Iran's nuclear program despite the UN warning. The second one is close economic relations between Russia, China, and Iraq. And finally, Venezuela's growing importance in Latin America. And if anyone knows the history of Venezuela and how energy plays a big role in its politics, then he or she must also know that there is a complicated relations in Venezuela and USA as well. So Russia's veto power in the UN Security Council. How many permanent members are there in the UN Security Council?
5, sir.
We call them P5, right?
Right, sir.
The permanent five. So
Yes, sir.
do you think this setup is up against democratic values?
Yes.
Anyone?
Oh, no, they aren't.
The setup, that means only these five countries should be the member of UN Security Council, which have obviously executive powers and unparalleled control over the decisions of the UN decision-making bodies. Do you think it's some sort of a non-democratic setup?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, if I give the recent example, most of the members voted for Palestine to become a member state of a full member state of United Nations, but only one country did not vote. And like so, it is clear that more than majority wants something to be done, but just because one country doesn't want it, and it's not being implemented, so that goes against the majority idea, so against democracy.
Yeah, and if you look also the information of this particular forum, See, there is no loser of the Second World War. All are the winners. So it's like winner takes all. That means whoever won the second one, they could only have the membership within this elite society or the elite club. And also the other non-permanent members. How many non-permanent members are there in the UN Security Council? Do you know this? Obviously, you will know this more when you have that course, regional and international institutions. You will learn more about that. So just for now, remember, try to remember that UN Security Council have 10 non-permanent members, and in every 2 years, there's a change within this non-permanent membership. But those fives, the permanent fives, they remain there. Okay. So Bangladesh was also at one time was a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. So the Russia's veto power in the UN Security Council, which is its unique position in supplying gas, electricity, and oil to Europe, and control over one of the world's two largest nuclear arsenals, make it important to understand how energy has changed Russia internally and its role in the international community. So if you look at the way the West behaved towards Russia and the way the West behaved towards some other countries, say for example Iraq or say Afghanistan, you see that it's a totally different type of treatment. So why this sort of or differentiation in terms of treatment is because of several factors. The first one is that Russia holds the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. The second one is that Russia is the topmost supplier of gas to the European market, and the European market is vulnerable to the Russian gas supplies, especially during the time of winter months. Because, as you know, in Europe, particularly during the harsh winters, you need to keep your houses or your house warm, and in that case, you need energy to heat up your homes. So, which European countries actually depend on this gas that I read? If you look the countries from east, the dependency is the highest and it diminishes as you move towards the west. So Northern Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Moldova, Finland, Latvia, they have the highest. That means more than 90%, 100% dependent on Russian gas energy because of their close proximity with Russia. Then if you move farther west, you see Bulgaria, Germany, Italy, Poland, and France. They have some sort of a high to moderate to dependency on Russian energy supply, and Netherlands, Romania, Georgia have very least dependency on Russian gas supply, and Ireland and Ukraine have zero. Obviously, Ukraine has a different case. So you may say that Ukraine is the close neighbor to the Russia. So why Ukraine is not dependent on Russian energy? Because first of all, Ukraine also has its own source of energy, and Ukraine has historically, in the recent history, tried to get out of the shadows of Russia. Then the European Union's energy dependence on Russia is charted below in US dollars. So 1.8 is the mineral fuels on which they dependent on iron, steel, food, and others. So these two pictures, although they may look a bit difficult to understand or may look different, but they both send one common message is that the European energy or the European energy security is largely dependent on the Russian gas supply. However, this dependency has been tilted a little bit up against the Russia because of its invasion in Ukraine, and not only that this time, but the indication was that since Russia invaded or annexed Crimea from Ukraine, since then there was a growing consensus, or there was a growing demand within the European countries that we need to lessen dependence on Russian supply of oil. Eastern and Central European countries have more dependence on Russia primary energy as a result. Thus, Russia gas supply can affect Germany, Greece, Australia, Finland, and other European countries, especially the Nordic countries. So, pipeline gas connectivity usually create a long-term mutual dependency that helps prevent producer, consumer, and transmitter cutoff and boycotts. That means rather than transferring the oil or gas through, say, ships, if you establish lines, pipelines, then it would have been much more sustainable and much more secure, and it creates some sort of an understanding between the two countries. Who one would be obviously the supplier, and the other one obviously would be the importer. So another case could be the Cold War did not disrupt the Soviet Union gas export to Central and Western Europe, despite having the Iron Curtain between the Eastern Europe and the Western Europe. Even the war in Ukraine could not stop Russian energy delivery to European clients. Yes, they did not stop, but it reduced to a significant level. And Russia has regularly used gas as a political weapon in conjunction with business price disputes, most notably during the confrontation with Ukraine in January 2006 and March in 2008, obviously when Russia went on to war against Georgia. Now, this is the case of Venezuela. I think I should leave this for next class. Enough for today for an online class. If you have any query up until the Russian point, I'll stop here. Do you have any query?